Hey, Jermaine Griggs here from Automation Clinic. And if you want to know how to adapt a spirit and philosophy of never ending improvement, also known as Kaizen, tune in to today's episode on positive feedback loops. You won't be sorry. Hey, Jermaine Griggs here, founder of AutomationClinic.com, and welcome to another edition of Automation Mondays, where every week without fail, I give you a new strategy, concept. I tackle a question or issue related to online sales, marketing, lead generation, sales conversion, funnels and systems, automation, and everything in between. And in today's episode, I want to kind of back up and cover another philosophy. Now, I'm known for my philosophies and things that I subscribe to that make me a better businessman and a better person in general. And I am always open to sharing these things that I think about in the event that maybe you've never heard of them or you've never had it conveyed this way. And today's episode is about Kaizen, a Japanese term that I learned several years ago, and it's been the foundation of how I grow my companies and my own life. And that term is Kaizen, and I want to write it down here. And Kaizen in English means continuous improvement. And some will tell you, and I don't even want to spell continuous, but maybe, let's see, I think I got it right there, continuous improvement. And some will say in the Japanese language that the continuous part is not necessary. It just simply means improvement. And you may know of Toyota's philosophy, founded on Kaizen, and we'll talk about that in a second. But it's this idea of never-ending, constant improvement. And we're not talking about big changes and big things. We're talking about small, incremental improvements. And really what it's based in, and something I want to connect it to, is what we call positive feedback loops, right? And what it is, and you're familiar with feedback loops, right? Because if you want to think of a very popular negative feedback loop, it's something that keeps an environment or a situation at equilibrium, right? So what can you think of that keeps something at a static level? And it looks for cues and changes, and if it sees changes, it reacts to bring things back to this equilibrium, right? A thermometer works that way, or an air conditioner rather, with a thermometer on it, right? If you set the room to 70 degrees, it's checking to see if things drop or if it gets hotter. If it moves to 71, right, it turns on the air to get that room back to 70 degrees. Or if you've got the automatic setting where it can go between heat and cool, if it drops to 67 degrees, it can throw some heat in the room to bring it back to 70. So a negative feedback loop is about keeping things at equilibrium, even in our own bodies. I'm not a doctor, biologist by no means, but we've got things to regulate our body temperature, right? I moved to an area that's very natural, and we've got all these trails and things. And what comes with living in the hills on an acreage is rattlesnakes. And being from the city, if you know my story, I'm from the city. I'm from the city of Long Beach, grew up with my grandma, my mom, and moved with my grandma, started this business here in Play at 17 years old. And then I come to school out in this area and end up moving even more south. And this is an area of nature and horses and, and that kind of thing, right? And I learned about rattlesnakes, and I learned that they can't regulate their own body temperature, so they have to come in your backyard sometimes. Knock on wood, we haven't had many encounters, but it doesn't have that regulative sort of system, that feedback loop that we as humans have and your air conditioner system might have. Now, positive feedback loop is kind of different because instead of coming back to equilibrium, it actually, with a positive feedback loop, it enhances or enlarges the effects of change, right? And it moves away from equilibrium, unlike the air conditioner, kicking on when it needs to. And we can think of something like population growth, right? If population starts having more kids, right? Well, those kids grow up and they have more kids, and then those kids, and then your population growth just expands, right? And that'd be like a positive feedback loop. Well, with Kaizen, what does that have to do with you? Well, constantly improving. How do you do it? Well, there's a 4-part system that Toyota implemented as a result of Kaizen. And it first starts with planning, right? So you got to plan what you want to do. Right? Everything starts with a plan. You've heard the cliche, if you fail to plan, right, you plan to fail. But like the good book says, faith without works is dead. So once you plan it, you've got to do, right? You've got to put that plan into action. Yeah, you can plan all you want. You can envision pie in the sky. You can have belief. You can have faith. You can want something to happen. You can have desire. But if you don't do, that's the second step in this positive feedback loop, right? You do based on your plan. You plan, you set out for it, right? Because you've heard it. Like I said, you fail to plan, you plan to fail. Now you do. And it's interesting because we have a neighbor that we just met that works for Toyota, regional manager. And, when I meet somebody in the flesh that does this stuff, especially knowing that Toyota is a big fan of Kaizen and has used it and all that stuff, I mean, she knew this. Like, it was a test, like a pop quiz for her. And she was like, oh, plan, do. After you do, you have to check. We talked about this, right? And she gave me like real life examples of how this works. Like in Toyota, they have this thing where you actually have to get on a plane and see it with your own eyes. Like if there's some observation you need to make or something's not right, or why is the red cars being bought at a greater rate and you can't figure it out on data, or maybe data saying one thing, they have this thing where they have to actually visually be there in the flesh to see it, to do their checking, if you will. So I thought that was very interesting. So that's the third step in the feedback loop is they check. And then based like that thermometer, based on what the findings are, then they act, right? And sometimes the action is a corrective action, right? And then sometimes the action is doing more of the same, right? Doing more of the same that led to the increase. And if there is increase in amplification of change, then they go back and plan how to do more of that, or how to go in that direction, or how to enhance, or how to implement in a way that these can be scaled out in other operations, or whatever it is. If you're doing A/B split testing, right, you plan your test first. Maybe you've heard me talk about headlines, the HIPAA formula. That's another video, automationmondays.com, right? And you're like, okay, I got 5 headlines I want to test. They've been saying that headlines can make or break a sales media tool, a video sales letter, a webinar. So I'm going to plan on testing these 3, headlines. Then you go ahead and do. Maybe you go to VWO.com, which is Visual Website Optimizer, and you split test your first 2 headlines. Okay? You give it some time. VWO says, we found a winner. You check and you see if your control is your original piece, that is the current winner or standing in the place of the winner, and you check and see if it's beat or not. If it got beaten, then there's a new control. Hail to the new king, right? You act on that. Either hail to the new king, queen, or let's go back to the drawing board. Let's figure out if that next headline can then do. So we go to plan that, we do it, we check, we act, we plan, we do. And if you're constantly improving like Kaizen, these are sometimes small changes. We're not talking about cataclysmic big changes, but they're small changes. But this is a positive feedback loop that continues to grow. And it reminds me of what I learned when I was personally working with Dan Sullivan. Some of you guys know him, strategic coach. And Dan Sullivan also gives us a positive feedback loop that he calls his 4 C's. And this is kind of relevant to anything as a business owner, entrepreneur that you set out to do. Your vision, your goals, where you want to take your company, some new aspiration, new level of, vision, what have you. You typically be interacting with the 4 C's. And the first part of it is commitment, right? You have to commit to whatever it is that you want to accomplish or set out for, right? You put that stake in the ground, you commit, right? And then the commitment will oftentimes lead to courage. That's how Dan teaches it, right? And, right, so you don't have to have courage before you commit, right? A lot of people are waiting for the big, bold courage. But if you look at some of history's biggest stories and change and inventions and people that changed the world, left their mark, they committed to it first, and then that commitment was like this positive feedback loop. It led to courage. As you do things and you figure out that first step, and then you have courage to do it, then what that does, right, that courage will lead you to capabilities, right? Capability that, mind you, I'm not a great drawer. I wish I could make this better. In fact, I'm going to have to draw these 4 C's over here. I'll title it over here, right? I don't have good spatial recognition at all, right? So that leads to capability, right? That you don't have to start with. You just have to start with commitment. I beseech you, if you got something you really want to do, commit fully to it. And then, your courage will come. It'll show up. Right? I don't mean to be all preaching and metaphysical and stuff, but it will. It'll show up. And then you will start building capabilities and skills. When I was that 17-year-old living with my grandma in the inner city with that 28.8 modem connection, I didn't know how to grow an online business, but something told that 17-year-old boy to commit to putting this thing online to show people how to learn to play the piano as I had done it as a kid, teaching neighborhood kids. I just committed and began to take action, planned it. And when I talk about my plans as a 17-year-old, they weren't elaborate, but I did something. I put the first step in place, and that started leading to my courage to do more. That commitment led to courage. Now I have courage. One of few kids in my high school walking around with a website that I had kind of learned how to build on GeoCities. Anybody remember that? Not around now, but it put me in the playing field. Then I had to learn how to catch. Then I learned how to bat. Then I learned how to run the bases, right? So it leads to capability. And then finally, that will lead you to confidence. You don't start with confidence. A lot of people think you start with confidence. You don't, right? You kind of go through this positive feedback loop. And then once you've got confidence, like when I had my first success, I'm like, wow, okay. My March 2nd, 2002, I talk about that experience. And now what do you think happens when I release my first DVD? Because I was on my book. Now I have confidence. That leads to commitment to knock this next product out of the park. I kind of been there. I tasted a little bit of it. So now I'm on that positive feedback loop, but it's an upward spiral. I'm on a second level, if you will, of this. And that leads to a newfound courage that's just a little bit more intense than it was in the last phase, the last level of the spiral, if you will, which leads to new capabilities. You think I'm the same person today and I have the same skills and capabilities that I had when I was 17? No, I grew. I learned new things. I became better and different, and I grew. And then that led to even more confidence. And, could I have thought myself speaking in front of 10,000 people? No. Could I have thought I would go from the projects to the president's house, the White House? No. But all those things happened for me as my spiral began to positively grow. Plan, do, check, act, commitment, courage, capability, confidence, continuous improvement, Kaizen. So that's all I wanted to do in this Automation Mondays, is expose you to some frameworks, some ways of thinking that I know I embraced several years ago. And I remember these philosophies and I keep these in the forefront of my mind because I don't care how advanced or experienced of an entrepreneur you will become. You'll have times where your confidence is shaky. You have times where you think you don't have the capability, or there are going to be new times. See, because as you get to the next level, if you're growing, you're putting yourself in uncomfortable situations. If you're growing the way that I want to grow, and you find yourself in the boardroom with some really powerful, powerful people, and you start thinking, am I capable of being here and being in these conversations? Do they know something I don't know? All right. But hey, I'm going to commit to being on this new board. I'm going to find the courage or grow into the courage to speak up when I know what I'm talking about. That's going to lead to capabilities, and I'm going to turn around a year from now and be more confident, be, more in the loop. And then I'm going to turn around 5 years from now and it's going to be the norm, right? And that's how it is as you're growing, right? And that's why we call it positive feedback loop. It enlarges and expands change versus the negative feedback loop, which is always trying to get you back to equilibrium. And there's some reasons for that in places where equilibrium is ideal, right? A rocket going to its target needs to self-correct. We don't need it changing. We want more predictive type of behavior, right? And we don't want too many variables, so we're correcting to get to that target. That's one thing. But when we're talking about continuous improvement, we're talking about changing away from that equilibrium. We're talking about expanding, and we're talking about spiraling upward. And that's what Kaizen and this philosophy of continuous improvement will give you. So this has been another episode of Automation Mondays. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. If you want more of this, go over to automationmondays.com and check me out over there. You can get past episodes. You can also log into YouTube, subscribe to my channel so you can be among the first to know when I release new video episodes. Go to Automation Clinic, subscribe to the blog over there so you can see all the value we're giving, and get us on social media, Facebook, and see some of the posts that we make on a daily basis. I'm Jermaine Griggs, signing off on behalf of Automation Clinic. Remember, let your business run itself.